Welcome back to Conservative Cat. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to claw through the noise so you can lead your family, defend your liberty, and hold the line in a culture of compromise. I'm going to ask you something today. If you knew your local bus union was shaking down Springfield for $770 million and the only justification was, oh, we need a new app, would you laugh or would you cry? Because that's where we're at here in the state of Illinois. We're going to get to that story because guess what? They're going to tax you on your way out so they can save the Chicago transit system. How Illinois plans to punish you for leaving your home. We're going to get to that here this morning. Population Denier-in-Chief, Governor J.B. Pritzker. We're going to get to him and all of his sanctuary state lies. And I also want to get to the mob boss of Springfield. You might know him as Michael Madigan. He was sentenced, but guess what? The damage has already been done. So we're going to get to all of it here on Conservative Cat. As always, be sure to go to patriotpumpenergy.com. Grab your bottle of Patriot Pump and use promo code Conservative Cat. That's $10 off at checkout. That's the best promo code out there. I do want to get to this sort of breaking news as of like 6-7 hours ago. The suspect who was the target, they've apprehended him of these two shootings. These two Minnesota lawmakers. One Minnesota lawmaker was brutally attacked, shot. 2 dead, 2 others critically injured. This guy was captured finally last night, Sunday evening. Okay, and this, of course, was followed by a very intense manhunt. They've been after this guy for a couple of days now. Vance Bolter, he's 57 years old. He was arrested in Sibley County. So he identified himself to law enforcement officers searching the area. So I don't know what exactly that looked like. Did he just walk up to the officers and say, hey, I'm Vance Bolter. I'm the guy you're looking for. I don't know how this kind of went down, but he was described the officials described this capture as relentless and determined police work. So there was a photo released by the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office, okay, and it shows Bolter in custody with a caption that says, "The face of evil. After relentless and determined police work, the killer is now in custody. Thanks to the dedication of multiple agencies working together along with the support of the community, justice is one step closer." Now, this is a terror. I can't believe that this happened over the weekend. So sad. There's a few things you need to know about this story. There's a lot of lies out there. I'm gonna claw through the lies for you, and I'm gonna provide you some truth. Number one, though, before we get into this story and what you need to know, Ramsey County Sheriff, I don't know what the hell you're doing with that post. Okay, you can't go out there, and he's got to stand trial. Okay, it's called due process. I'm not saying that the guy didn't do it, right? But this gives him grounds, I would argue, for a mistrial. I mean, they said that he's the killer in this post. They called him the face of evil in this post. Not very professional. That's pretty much grounds for a mistrial. You're entitled to a trial in this country. And yes, we probably all know that he did it. But you can't come out on your social media site, or Ramsey County Sheriff, and say he did it, right? You have to continue to call him the alleged killer. Okay, I've never seen a police department do that before in my life. I've been doing this a very long time. That was that's insane. And I swear, if he uses that in court, I'm going to be really upset, and that might just be enough to declare a mistrial. I'm going to be honest. What the hell are you guys doing? Anyway, Bolter, he's accused of killing these Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark, early on Saturday morning in their home in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. He is also believed to have shot State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, in their Champlin residence. Okay, so they survived the attack, Hoffman and his wife, but they sustained multiple gunshot wounds. Hennepin County District Court has charged Bolter with 4 felony counts of second-degree murder with intent. And then, according to the complaint, Bolter was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of Melissa and Mark Hortman, and 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder for the shootings of John Hoffman and Yvette Hoffman. Okay, so all of this, I mean, if he's convicted on all of it, each of those 40 years, he's never getting out of prison. Okay, each of those felonies carries a maximum sentence of 40 years. But most likely, he's never going to get out of prison. The mandatory minimum of 3 years due to the use of a firearm. Okay, so 40 years in prison for each of those, and then a mandatory minimum of 3 years due to the use of a firearm. So I guess in Minnesota, you can go for that if you commit murder, like second-degree murder with a firearm. That's like a mandatory minimum of 3 years as well. So you tack that on. Drew Evans, he's the superintendent here, according to the most post-millennial of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehensions. He said that officials had located Bolter's vehicle and hat, that the cowboy hat that was in the area, and it was thrown out the window. And they apprehended him, and they got his hat that was in the area. They had located him shortly after finding that hat, I guess. And Evans noted that Bolter was being pursued by both federal, local law enforcement. They had warrants. They urged residents to report suspicious activity. According to Fox News, Bolter verbally identified himself to authorities who were searching for him in the area on Sunday evening. So I don't know how exactly that looked. Did he turn himself in? That'd be pretty odd. Authorities said that the attack was premeditated. Bolter allegedly showed up at the lawmakers' homes wearing a police-style uniform and a rubber mask, to carry out those shootings. I'm going to be honest with you. It's very hard to tell who's under that mask. You can't really see anybody's face. It's a rubber mask, a full-blown mask, a police uniform. So he committed those shootings in that garb. Okay, and then later he was found on surveillance video with the cowboy hat. But I don't know. This is odd for a police department to put out there that he is the killer. You're really treading on dangerous ground there. They could declare a mistrial. I think that he's got enough there. I mean, that's shocking to me that the police posted that. But also, I mean, it's going to be pretty tough to prove that that's the guy because the rubber mask, right? So authorities said that the attack was premeditated. Inside Bolter's vehicle, they found, of course, protester flyers that said "No King's Day" on it, or "No Kings." That was a phrase obviously tied to the nationwide protests surrounding President Donald Trump. And ICE, multiple No Kings protests were scheduled across the nation, but also in Minnesota, where Tim Walz was the headliner. He was speaking at this No Kings protest. I think it was in Brooklyn Park. I'll have to look where exactly Tim Walz was at, but he was speaking at one of these No Kings protests. Actually, this No Kings protest he was speaking at, Anna Paulina Luna, a congresswoman, had questioned him about this during a House Oversight Committee hearing. And she said, hey, this No Kings protest that you're planning on speaking at has ties to China. Now that I've made you aware of this, plus coupled with the fact that the Chinese government has deemed you pretty much a compromise, like you could easily be swayed. That's what, according to Anna Paulina, like the DOJ, they've found out that this Chinese government thinks that Tim Walz would be an individual we could compromise. That's what the CCP thinks. So this is really a fascinating story. It's weird. It gets weirder, though. He had a manifesto, which we can't see. They've not. They said that they're not going to release that. And I don't know, now that they've apprehended it, they might release it now. But he also served on Governor Tim Walz's Workforce Development Board. He was appointed to that board in 2019 by Governor Tim Walz. Now, here's a few things you need to know about this story. He is a registered Republican, but in Oklahoma. I got to fact check the mainstream media on this because they keep saying he's a registered Republican as of 2022. False. Totally false. He was a registered Republican in 2004 when apparently he lived in Oklahoma. He had voter registration cards for 1967, and then 2004, something like that. He had these voter cards and he's a registered Republican in Oklahoma. You can't be a Republican or a Democrat officially, like registered in Minnesota, because they have something called open primaries. And it's been that way for like a century now, where you can't really register as a Democrat or a Republican. So when the mainstream media says that he's a registered Republican as of 2022, that's just false. He registered as a voter in 2022 in Minnesota, but you don't register as a Democrat or a Republican in that state. He was also appointed, as I said, by Tim Walz in 2019 to the Workforce Board, Workforce Council, or whatever it is, Development Board. I don't know. It's a nonpartisan board, but here's where it gets interesting. He was appointed to that board first by Governor Mark Dayton. Okay. Here's where things get really weird fast. So keep up with me. Okay. The Minnesota Africans United nonprofit organization had him plastered all over their website. Okay. And then they scrubbed it shortly after it was said that he had allegedly killed these two lawmakers, or killed Melissa and her husband, and severely wounded gunshots, attempted murder, the Hoffman fellow, the other lawmaker. Okay. And we have to point out that Melissa Hortman, she had a very controversial vote. She was the sole Democrat to not vote for illegal immigrants to get taxpayer-funded health care, okay, in the state of Minnesota. I have to mention that fact as well, because it's really interesting. Minnesota Africans United nonprofit, okay, had him plastered all over the website. Vance Bolter, all over the website. They scrubbed it, and the CEO, Basil Ajuo, had come out and said that Vance Bolter, was not an employee. He was just a keynote speaker at several events of theirs. And he was just a speaker, an event speaker. He wasn't an actual employee or didn't have a whole lot of association with the organization. Well, he was plastered all over the website. We got the screenshots. Basil, he was appointed to serve on the Minnesota State Colleges and University Boards at the same time, same year as Vance Bolter, when he was appointed to the governor's Workforce Council, or board, whatever, Workforce Development Board. So the MAU, the Minnesota Africans United, I did some digging and I found out that they are backed by the Target Foundation, and then there's another backer called Bremer Bank. But as you guys know, these nonprofits, it's really hard to track down where all their money comes from. There's grants, obviously taxpayer-funded grants that go to these types of organization, but there's a lot of donors. The big one that I found was the Target Foundation. Target, as in the store Target, Target Corporation, their foundation. So very bizarre. And this isn't like a really, like most nonprofits, they generate insane amounts of revenue. This one is kind of a small nonprofit, not huge, but it's got like parent nonprofits to it as well, called Global Minnesota and SCORE, SCORE. So there's a lot of questions I've got about this nonprofit organization. He has ties. Obviously, he was in Africa. He was in several foreign countries, Vance Bolter, doing work. Okay. There needs to be some transparency here, because the mainstream media got this so wrong. They said he was a Republican. They said he was like this MAGA guy. They also tried to tell you that he lived with this guy that worked at Papa John's, and that he was like this, you know, poverty type guy, and they didn't disclose to you this guy's wealth. Okay, he lives, his primary residence is valued at $900,000. Okay, and he's got a wife and he's got 5 kids. Okay, so he wasn't this guy living with this Papa John's employee like the mainstream media tried to dupe you into thinking. It was failed to be mentioned by Tim Walz that Vance Bolter was appointed by himself for this workforce board. And it was failed. He failed to mention that Jennifer Bolter that she had worked for as an intern, Tim Walz, while he was a House a congressman. This is shocking stuff to me. So there's a lot of lies out there. I hope I provided you some truth. He's not a registered Republican in the state of Minnesota. That's quite literally impossible because they have open primaries, which means you can pull either a Republican or Democrat ballot, and you don't have to be registered as a Republican or Democrat. So that's a lie by the mainstream media. They also didn't fully disclose his ties to Tim Walz. I mean, his wife and himself, Vance Bolter, has ties to Tim Walz, which is shocking. They also tried to report that he lived in this very modest property, and he lived there with a Papa John's employee. But the guy's got $900,000 house. Okay. So there were many things that the mainstream media lied about at first with this story. And I get it. It's a developing story and you might get some details wrong. But I think Tim Walz needs to answer as to why he failed to mention that the guy's wife worked for him when he was a congressman, and that Tim Walz actually appointed him to the Workforce Development Board back in 2019. I also am very curious about this Minnesota Africans United nonprofit and his work there. We do know that the Chinese, now this is complete speculation. We do know that the Tim Walz and the Chinese are like this. He was even questioned by Anna Paulina Luna just a couple of days prior to this shooting, these two shootings that happened. He was questioned by Anna Paulina Luna, and she asked him, hey, why would you go to China 30 times, visit them 30 times? Why the hell would you do that? Why the hell are you participating in a protest, this No Kings protest, which has ties to China? Indivisible, which is the nonprofit organization, which we'll get to here in a second, has ties to China. Why are you going to speak at this event? And now that I've informed you that the Chinese government also deems you as a compromise type individual, an individual that they could compromise, and they've identified you as such. Why would you continue? So he continued to go speak at that event, by the way, despite Anna Paulina Luna questioning him about his ties to China. We do know what's going on in Africa. Okay, the Minnesota Africans United. We know that China has pretty much taken over Africa. I've told you about this, the One Belt Road Initiative, and about how China has gone in and they do these, they're called debt trap loans. And they promise Africa all kinds of money for infrastructure, and this poor country can't pay back the loan for the infrastructure. So what does China do? They've done this in South America as well. They've come in, they've built ports, they've pretty much taken over the country without taking over the country via weaponry, right? Or via a siege. Africa is pretty much China's now. Okay, so really interesting, this nonprofit organization. And just keep that in mind. Tim Walz, his connection to the Chinese. Okay, he's gone there, visited 30 times. Hell, I haven't even visited any place 30. My local diner, okay, which I'm considered a regular, I haven't gone to my local diner probably 30 times. Okay, it's bizarre that he's visited China 30 times. I mean, at that point, you're considered a regular, and they probably are on a first name basis with the guy. And he was questioned about it during a House Oversight Committee. So it's not just good old Cat who's questioning Tim Walz's ties to China, but also Anna Paulina Luna during the House Oversight Committee had pointed out that China actually deemed him in an internal memo, a DOJ internal memo. China actually deemed him like an individual whom they could compromise. Okay, essentially, that's what they were talking about, and that's not something that we should just dismiss. And we have to understand the geopolitics here. Africa is pretty much taken over by China now. And he was working in Africa, this Vance Bolter guy. And clearly he was a part of this nonprofit organization. He was scrubbed from the website shortly after this came out. Really bizarre stuff going on here. I do want to get to the rest of today's show, but let me know in the comments section. Have you heard anything else weird about this story? It's a weird story, and more keeps coming out, and I don't know. That was all speculation. I'm not saying that he did anything, that Vance Bolter did anything to these two lawmakers on behalf of a foreign government. His foreign ties creep me out. The fact that he is a part of, obviously, this nonprofit organization, although the CEO has come out and said, no, he's not an employee of the organization. He spoke at every single event. He was a keynote speaker and pretty much spoke at every single event, and he was plastered all over the website. And then they scrubbed the website. Very weird. And knowing the geopolitics, that's where people don't understand. The geopolitics over in Africa right now and the landscape over there. I mean, it's China's. They've got ports over there. They've pretty much taken over with these debt trap loans. And it's shocking. I don't know. I'm not saying he did anything on behalf of a foreign government. But anytime your lawmakers are being gunned down, and especially on a day where we know these protests have been funded by China and by big billionaires who don't live here. I mean, you couple all of you got all these dots. I'm starting to connect them. I'm not saying he did this on behalf of a foreign government, but I don't think we should rule out the question, hey, Vance Bolter, did you do this on behalf of a foreign government? I don't know. When your lawmakers start getting gunned down, Democrat or Republican. These were two Democrat lawmakers. I don't know why John Hoffman, would have been targeted. This was the guy who didn't die. But Melissa, she did just come off 5 days after this vote. It was a very controversial vote. She broke down in tears over this vote. She voted against illegal immigrants having healthcare, taxpayer-funded healthcare. Let's get into the rest of today's story. I promised. I promised I got a lot to do today, so I want to get into taxed on the way out. Illinois is planning to punish you for leaving your home now, by the way. So I asked you the question at the beginning of the show. So your local bus union, if you found out your local bus union was shaking down Springfield for $770 million, that's $750 million, and the only justification as to why they wanted the money was a need for a new app, you'd probably laugh or you'd start to cry because, I mean, that's where we're at here in the state of Illinois. The Regional Transportation Authority, this is the RTA, the Chicago government-run transit operation, they say that the sky is falling. They want $750 million or they're going to start laying off 3,000 union workers. So let's dig into this. Here's what they're reporting. They're saying that by 2026, they'll hit a fiscal cliff. Why? Well, because their COVID emergency money, the one-time federal piggy bank they drained is drying up. Okay, they drained it, and like a reckless addict, they are shocked that their next hit didn't magically appear. Okay, this is COVID money. This was emergency money. If you created programs or did whatever unsustainable programs and you created them with this money, that was stupid. And why would you do that? This was one-time money. Okay, federal, they drained it, and now they want another hit because they're an addict. They're an addict for taxpayer dollars, of course. Their plan now is to demand $770 million from taxpayers, not to expand services, not to fix the decaying infrastructure that is the Chicago transit system or the Regional Transit Authority, Chicago transit system. That's really what this is. It's Chicago buses, trains. No, they're not going to fix anything. They're not going to expand their services, fix the decaying infrastructure, the crime that happens on these trains a lot of the times and buses. They're not going to fix any of that. What they want the money for is to just keep things exactly the same. And they want to go with one app instead of 7, because right now, I guess in Chicago, there's like 7 different apps you can use when riding, either the train or bus or whatever. State Senator Ram Villavalam quoted Center Square. He says, there's too many transit apps. Okay, well, that's kind of your problem, not my problem. Why'd you guys create so many apps in the first place? So he says that the solution here is to rename the RTA, the Regional Transit Authority. They want to rename it, and then they want to expand the board and centralize decision-making. And they want to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into new bureaucracy, essentially, because they're expanding the board, but they also want to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into technology, this new app that's going to pretty much consolidate the 7 apps that they already have. Folks, you don't have to be a software engineer to know that this is probably the most expensive app in all of humankind, all of human history. Like, that's pretty expensive. This is $750 million, and they want to pour all this money into an app. Not expand services, not make the ride safe, nothing like that. Let's talk about who's really driving this bus, because it's not about transit. It's really about the public sector unions, okay? They can smell this crisis. They're like, ooh, how can we monetize on this crisis? So here's how it works. The unions, with the CTA, they're going to demand unsustainable raises and benefits, okay? Now, the politicians, especially in Chicago, they're going to agree to these unsustainable raises and benefits. Well, they have to because of Amendment 1, but they're going to agree as well because these same unions are the ones who bankroll their campaigns, the politicians' campaigns. The unions funnel the money right back to them. And the budget explodes. Okay, because we have to pay these unsustainable raises and benefits to these union workers, and our budget explodes. This is what's been going on for several years now. It started out at $30 billion prior to Governor J.B. Pritzker, our budget, and it's ballooned to $55 billion, something like that. So then they'll run out of money again, and then they'll turn to you, the taxpayer. And when anybody suggests cuts, reform, accountability, like, hey, what are you doing with all the money? You're obviously paying the union guys, but like, we gave you like $770 million. What'd you do with it? We created an app and we kept things the same, and we just kept doing this unsustainable thing. But if you suggest like cuts, accountability, or anything like that, they're going to scream at you, and they're going to say, think of the workers, think of the families, think of the bus drivers. How could you? You're going to hear the union shouting. And I couldn't be more clear. This is not about the worker on the ground. This isn't about those who are serving the community and are riding or driving the buses, okay? This is about the union bosses, the political kickbacks, and keeping the gravy train running. Even if they have to take your last gallon of gas money to do it, the taxpayer, they want this gravy train to just keep on running. They want to line the union bosses' pockets. Okay, 200,000 plus salaries some of these people are making, okay? And we're not talking, president of the CTA. We're talking like just a low-level train like guy that works on the train, $200,000 a year in some cases, okay? So these union bosses, they get all kinds of money, and then they put that money right back into the campaigns of these politicians. So they just want the gravy train to keep going. I mean, it's classic Michael Madigan stuff that's going on here, and I can see right through it. So their brilliant plan here with the $770 million that they want to get, they want to rebrand the agency. So they want to rename it. And then they're going to take the board from 16 members to 20 members. Great. Expanding bureaucracy. That always works. Then they want to centralize all power with a super transit structure. So it's like centralizing all of these tiny little Chicago transit authorities and these little authorities, and they want to centralize it. And then they want to build one app to rule them all. So clearly there's other reasons why people don't want to ride public transit in Chicago. It's not because the app is probably convenient. I'm willing to bet that it's probably very unsafe. These stations, these train stations, the buses even, there's unreliable schedules, even though we're paying these people a ton of money to work for the Chicago Transit Authority. There's constant delays, there's mismanagement, and everybody who has utilized the Chicago transit system, you get this feeling that it's being run by people who couldn't even run a lemonade stand. So I don't think that the app is to blame. I really don't. Or all the apps right now. Yes, it might be a small factor, but really the big factor, I think that it's just that it's unsafe and it's mismanaged and the schedules are unreliable, and all of that contributes to why people don't actually ride this thing, and they aren't keeping up with they're obviously not collecting fares, enough fares to cover their fiscal cliff that they're going to run into come 2026. So essentially what I think this is like, imagine the Titanic sinking Okay, imagine, close your eyes, imagine you're on the Titanic and it's sinking. And there's a bunch of deck chairs, right? Somebody says, hey, let's rearrange the deck chairs. That might help. And then they say, hey, let's charge everybody on the boat. Let's charge everybody on the Titanic here $1.50 and a delivery tax to move these chairs around. And that might stop the Titanic from sinking. But we're going to take the $1.50 and we're just going to move the chairs around on the sinking Titanic. That's what this is about. Okay, so someone's got to pay for this fantasy, this transit fantasy. It's you. The Senate did pass this. It did not pass both houses, okay? But it could come back. It's this $1.50 delivery tax, which means every DoorDash, grocery order, anything you get shipped to your house, a pharmacy order, is going to be charged an extra $1.50, and you're going to have to pay that $1.50 charge for the Chicago transit system. And because apparently that's a taxable behavior now. If you just have things delivered to your house, that's a taxable behavior. Okay. But it gets better. Actually, it gets worse. They tacked on a real estate transfer tax. So if you flee Illinois, they can squeeze the last little bit out of you on your way out. That's what they want to do. They want to implement a real estate transfer tax and this $1.50 tax to try to fix this sinking ship, which is the CTA. And their plan to fix it is to rearrange deck chairs like the sinking Titanic. So they want to implement this new app, and they think that's going to solve all their problems with the transit system. No, it's just mismanaged, and you guys aren't spending your money correctly, and you're lining the pockets of these union bosses who then funnel that money right back to the politicians. So Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, he's a socialist, obviously, and he says it all with a smile. He goes, well, we're just going to tax the millionaires. That's what we're doing. Okay, the ultra rich are not sitting around waiting to fund a broken bus system and with failing union contracts. Like, no, they're not sitting around waiting to fund these broken buses. Okay, a lot of them are broken. It's a failing system. Have you ever rode anything via the CTA? It's terrible. And I want to remind you that they're not sitting around wanting to fix this, okay, the millionaires. What will ultimately happen, Brandon Johnson says, tax the millionaires. Okay, the millionaire tax never stays at the top. Once it passes, it trickles down faster than a kid with a melted ice cream cone. Okay, the droppings from the melted ice cream cone. It trickles down to the middle class families, and you're stuck with the bill. See, the millionaire tax, he goes, well, we'll just tax the millionaires. We don't have to do the delivery fee, right? We don't have to do the real estate transfer tax. We're going to tax the millionaires. Okay, well, middle class families always get stuck with the bill. It trickles down. Okay, the millionaires are not sitting around waiting to fund this broken bus system. Okay, so the middle class, who is that? That's you. That's me. That's the mechanic in Bloomington. That's the homeschool mom in Peoria. That's the retired couple in Rockford. And we're funding Chicago's incompetence, really, whether we use the train or not. I've used it a couple of times, and it was a nightmare. And now if I go up to Chicago, I drive, and that's a nightmare. But it's better than using the Chicago transit system. I do want to pivot. Not just I want to talk about this story not just politically but spiritually, because the Bible does talk a lot about work, stewardship, and justice. So let's go right here. Proverbs 11 verse 1. Dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. So what is the government doing when they're taking away from hardworking families to pad the bloated union bosses' salaries and their budget, just so that way they can contribute right back to them? Okay. The politicians, they've crafted favorable legislation or legislation that funnels more money into their pockets. And then in turn, they'll line their campaign coffers with cash, right? So what is the government? What does it say about the government when they take from working families to pad these bloated union bosses' salaries? What does it say about them? What does it say when politicians protect these corrupt labor union contracts and your property taxes rise, your taxes rise, you have to pay a delivery fee? But these people get these corrupt union contracts all the time. That's not justice. It's not compassion. What I would call that, it's called dishonest scales. And Proverbs 11, verse 1 tells us about dishonest scales, and that's an abomination to the Lord. So they're watching an entire system, or what they're doing is they're watching it just crumble, and it's all built on imbalance. The system, it would not survive without the taxpayer, and the taxpayer has to subsidize this system, otherwise it wouldn't work. Okay, and the unions, they hoard this power, they hoard the money, they funnel the money right back to the politicians protect them because they funnel that money right back into their campaign coffers. And guess who pays for it at the end of the day? You, the families in Illinois pay for this, and this is not God's design for work and community. I mean, his design, his original design is that the scales are equal. Okay, there aren't dishonest scales, that there's equal opportunity. And the government was never meant to replace personal responsibility. These people have to be personally responsible. They have to take accountability, and they have to fix this themselves and stop going to the taxpayer for a bailout. Okay, so what do we do from here? Because I like to tell you how we can fight back. First, it's obvious. No more taxes, period. You don't reward waste and poor behavior. Okay, they've obviously mismanaged their money, and they've given salaries to people, probably very, very thick salaries to people who don't deserve them. And you don't reward waste with more resources. You don't do that ever. You get them to fix the system, and you get them to manage their money correctly. Second, we demand a full audit of these union contracts, how these unions are awarded these contracts, how many hours a week do these workers actually work, what are the pension obligations, where did all the federal COVID cash go? These are questions that need to be asked. Third, we need to support legislation that bans public sector unions from donating to candidates who negotiate their contracts. Okay, that's just common sense, that's integrity, and that's biblical accountability. Fourth, we need to educate our families, talk about this at dinner, talk about it in your small group at church, because we need a culture that believes that there is one savior, and the savior is Jesus Christ, not the government. Okay, we want our kids to believe that the government is not their savior, and culture wants you to believe that government is their savior. We don't want that. We know better. And salvation doesn't come on a government bus. Okay, freedom doesn't come from a union contract, and justice doesn't come from rebranded bureaucracy. We need to start demanding personal responsibility from the people at CTA, and we need to start asking the questions. Hey, full audit of the union contracts. How do you award these contracts? Is it because these unions tend to funnel money into your coffers, Brandon Johnson? How do you award these contracts to these unions? How many hours do these workers actually work? Should they be getting $200,000 salaries? Are they actually putting in the work for a $200,000 salary? What kind of pension obligations do we have here? What'd you do with all the federal COVID cash? You burned through that, and now you want $770 million from us? I don't think so. All right, so I want to shift gears here. Let's talk a little bit about Governor J.B. Pritzker, because he had a pretty bold lie right in front of Congress. It's probably one of the boldest lies I've ever heard, and he said it right out loud in front of Congress. Despite decades-long documentation, there's documentation about this population decline that we're seeing here in the state of Illinois, despite hundreds of thousands of people fleeing the state, despite over 500,000 illegal immigrants draining our resources and the system, and them coming in to replace the population. Governor J.B. Pritzker looked at a sitting congressman who asked him about the population decline and said, quote, "Your numbers are wrong." That's a direct quote from Governor J.B. Pritzker. He said it twice, by the way, "Your numbers are wrong," because apparently if you say something loud enough, Governor J.B. Pritzker thinks that that'll make it true if you say something twice. that'll make it true. Well, not on this show. We're going to get into the numbers and how he is wrong, sir. Governor J.B. Pritzker, you're wrong, sir. We are losing population here in the state of Illinois. I do have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going to dig into this story. Enjoy conservative cat clips here on Conservative Cat. Welcome back to Conservative Cat Clips, where we don't meow around with the facts. No. I'm Kat, and today we are heading down to the New York City subway system. Not for a ride, but for a reality check. Let's talk about Jordan Neely. The media painted him as a subway performer. They paint him as a troubled guy who just needed help, and he was on the subway to do no harm. His death, May 2023. About that time, it turned into another instance of racism and injustice. The headlines were out before the full story even hit the tracks. And here's what they left out, and here's what you deserve to know. Jordan Neely wasn't doing Michael Jackson impressions on the subway. He had 40 prior arrests. 40. He was on a watch list for violent behavior, including attacks on subway riders. Okay, and just 2 years earlier, before his death, he had punched a 67-year-old woman in the face, breaking her nose and her orbital bone. So this man was not a man in need of applause, by the way. He had a long, dangerous history. Shame on his father. He should have taught him better. He should have been there for his mentally ill son. His father instead went out and tried to secure funding and, made himself look like he was the victim. The man, this was a man with a very long, Jordan Neely, long, dangerous history, roaming free on a system that fails both the public and the mentally ill. I won't lie there that it fails the public, but it also fails the mentally ill. Shame on his dad. Like I said, he should have been there for him. Somebody in this guy's life should have been there for him. On the day of his death, Neely was threatening passengers. Witnesses reported him shouting, throwing trash, and saying he didn't care if he died or went to jail. He goes, I don't care if I die. I don't care if I go to jail. One Marine veteran, Daniel Penny, did what many were afraid to do in this situation. He stepped in and he put him in a sleeper hold. And when it was all over, he got charged for manslaughter, because in today's America, protecting people gets you in handcuffs, and threatening people gets you hashtags and GoFundMes, and your dad's out there with the politicians asking for political donations and asking for GoFundMe money. Let's get real. The true scandal here was not Neely's death. It's how many times the system failed before it got there. Okay, before... Like the system failed so much. It failed the public. It failed Jordan Neely. Why was a violent offender with a known mental illness on the streets? Why wasn't he locked away in an insane asylum? This is where New Yorkers are left to fend for themselves, while their city leaders blame systemic injustice or whatever, systemic racism. Why is self-defense treated like a crime now, by the way? Daniel Penny, he just defended himself and all those New Yorkers in the subway. And what was his thanks? Charged. So soft on crime policies, empty jails, and woke prosecutors putting everyday Americans in danger on subways, sidewalks, and in their own neighborhoods. This is the cold, hard truth. That is what led to that incident. Okay. Soft on crime policies. He would have never been there had we been hard on crime policies in New York. The media didn't cover Neely's victims, by the way. They didn't tell you that the woman he brutalized, broke her orbital bone. They didn't tell you about the terrified passengers that Daniel Penny saved. They just gave you a headline again, similar to Michael Brown in 2014, similar to George Floyd in 2020. And once again, politics replaced justice and people got rich. BLM, they got rich, and all of these radical groups get rich. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. I'm Kat, reminding you, we don't fix society by ignoring lawlessness. We don't protect the vulnerable by unleashing the unstable. And we sure as heck don't get justice by punishing the people who are brave enough to step up when no one else would. It's time we choose public safety, not a public spectacle. Okay, this has been Conservative Cat Clips. Hey, good morning. This is Conservative Cat. Be sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the subscribe button and share this out with one friend. Tell them about Conservative Cat. Before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about Governor J.B. Pritzker and how he looked a U.S. congressman dead in the eyes and said, "Your numbers are wrong, sir, when it comes to the population crisis here in the state of Illinois, despite decades of documentation proving that there has been a population decline." He said it twice. He goes, "Your numbers are wrong, sir." He denied it. He's the population denier-in-chief, Governor J.B. Pritzker. Well, not on this show. We're not going to lie. Just because you said it twice doesn't make it true, Governor J.B. Pritzker. Let's take a listen. Here we go.
It gets to the U.S. House of Representatives. Year after year, tens of thousands of U.S. Citizens are fleeing the state of Illinois. It ranks only behind Governor Hochul's New York and Governor Newsom's California. You all are protecting and harboring illegal aliens for political purposes. Governor Pritzker, would you support prohibiting illegal aliens from being counted in the census, yes or no?
Your numbers are wrong, sir.
Would you, yes or no?
Your numbers are wrong, sir.
Would you
Constitution
support
says how you
prohibiting
count the
illegal
census.
aliens from being counted in the census? Would you? Or
No.
was harboring illegal aliens part of the strategy to get more Democrats in Congress?
The governor is a population denier. We've lost a congressional seat, probably going to lose another one or two by the time the next census rolls around. And again, I think the bump that they've seen is in the illegal immigration. And that was discussed yesterday about, do we count those or do we not? And so there was a lot of back and forth on counting illegal aliens and how that factors in. So, the governor does not deal with reality. There's definitely two different worlds there between what the Democrats, how they saw the world, and how the Republicans saw the world.
We've led for the last 4 years, 5 years. People want to leave the state of Illinois. We lost a congressional seat, as you're well aware. We have the lowest population in the city of Chicago now than in 100 years. People continue to flee Illinois. We have the fifth highest unemployment rate in the country, the second highest property tax rate in the country, the fifth highest illegal immigration population in the country, with over 500,000 illegal immigrants leaving in Illinois. None of that got mentioned before, but that's the reality. And to be honest with you, Governor Pritzker, I wish you didn't have to be here today as my governor.
Half of that is completely false and needs to be corrected, and I will if given the moment to speak.
Chair,
Our population is increasing. We have a higher population as a result of the census that was done in 2020. It was your Republican governor.
Governor, you'll have
You
time to
served in the
answer that.
legislature. You were part of those policies. We are turning the
Governor,
state around.
All right.
Well, I think that's interesting. Darren LaHood really got a rise out of Governor J.B. Pritzker, and it has been whispered that Darren LaHood is going to run for governor. I don't know. I asked him about it. He said, "I'm going to listen to my voters and hear what they have got to say." He goes, "I won't rule it out." So he didn't rule out a gubernatorial run in 2026. Governor J.B. Pritzker hasn't announced that he's going to run again in 2026. Oh, Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's a population denier. Congressman John McGuire, Republican from Virginia, said during a House committee hearing, oversight committee hearing on migrant sanctuary states, he said the state has lost population and a seat in Congress. What did Pritzker say? He says, "Your numbers are wrong, sir. Your numbers are wrong, sir." Okay, Pritzker, man, are you trying to audition for a musical? It's called Gaslight. Gaslight, the musical. I don't know. Here's the truth, okay? From 2010 to 2020, Illinois has lost more than 250,000 residents. We lost a congressional seat as a direct result. Okay, you don't lose a congressional seat just because you lose it, because you've lost residents. Okay, the U.S. Census estimates, it shows domestic outmigration every single year since 2014. So since 2014, there has been a population decline. So every year there's an outmigration. We don't add population, we lose population every single year since 2014. State Representative Brad Holbrook, who you heard there, is a Republican from Shelbyville, told the Center Square, quote, "The governor is a population denier. We've lost a congressional seat. Probably going to lose another one or two by the time the next census rolls around. Here's why Governor J.B. Pritzker wants to deny it. If you lose people, you lose power. Okay, and the governor's game is very, very simple. Let the illegal immigrants flood in, count them in the census, inflate Illinois' population on paper, keep the Democrat seats in Congress. That's what he's trying to do. And he got real riled up by Darren LaHood, I think, because he knows that this is going to lose him a 2028 bid, presidential bid, or the 2026 election. He knows that whoever runs against him, whatever Republican enters the race, that Republican is going to use this U.S. Census data and the fact that we've lost congressional seats against him. And that does not look good on him. If he wants to run for 2028 as a president, and if he wants to run as governor in 2026, either way, doesn't look very good on him. That's why he got so flustered, I think, there. And, you know, he's really just surviving politically at this point, and he's doing it at your expense. So he has to let illegal immigrants in. He has to. And it's all political. Okay, you've got to create a voter base, number one. Number two, you've got to make up for the population loss. And it's saving his ass politically. That's what he's doing here. So listen closely. In the same hearing, Representative McGuire asked a piercing question that he did not answer. You heard it right there. Do you support prohibiting illegal aliens from being counted in the census? This is obviously a strategy to get more Democrats into the state. They're going to vote Democrat. Hey, in exchange, we're going to provide you free healthcare. We're going to do that all at the expense of working families. We're going to take their tax dollars, provide you free healthcare. All we ask for in return is that you vote for us. You vote for Dems. And boom, that is their strategy. They want to get another congressional seat. They want a Democrat congressional seat. And it's all strategy. It's a whole game. They bring in 500,000 illegal immigrants to not assimilate, but to save their asses and to use them, essentially, and to use their illegal status over their heads. Hey, we know you're illegal. We're providing you health care. We're doing all these things for you. Now you have to show up to the ballot, to the polls, and you have to vote us in. You have to show up. And they count them for federal money, by the way, because we know that Illinois is fiscally just in the hole, like $140 billion in pension debt, by the way. So what they're going to try to do is count these illegal immigrants so that way they can get more federal dollars, because that also is a factor when the federal government gives you grants for things. How much population do you have? They're going to weaponize this census against citizens, actual citizens, by the way. They're going to count these illegal immigrants as residents, and they're not tax-paying citizens, right? They're illegal. They're not tax-paying citizens. And you're the one who's going to have to foot the bill to provide them their free health care because they're illegal, because they illegally crossed the border, or they came through an illegal port of entry, because apparently that alone makes you eligible for free health care. So how did Pritzker respond to this question, this very crucial question of, hey, do you agree that illegal immigrants should not be counted in the census? He fumbled. He said half of that is completely false, needs to be corrected, and I will correct it if I am given a moment to speak. So he didn't say, no, I don't believe that illegal immigrants should be counted in the census. That's a very clear, direct question. He did not answer it. Sorry, Governor, no more time for spin, because Illinois has the 5th highest illegal immigration population in the United States. That's not a conservative talking point. That's federal data. And Representative LaHood, he put it plainly. He said people continue to flee the state. We have the 5th largest unemployment rate in the country, highest unemployment rate in the country. We have the 2nd highest property tax rate. And we have 500,000 illegals living right here in the state of Illinois. 500,000 illegal immigrants here in the state of Illinois. That's unsustainable. To just put this into perspective for you. Smash that like button, by the way. If you're watching, subscribe. Put this into perspective. 500,000 illegal immigrants. That's the entire population of Peoria, Springfield, and Decatur combined. The entire population of those major cities in the state of Illinois. Let that sink in. Illinois is one of the most expensive states to live in. It's one of the least job-friendly states, obviously. We have the 5th highest unemployment rate. And the government throws open the door for these non-citizens, for people who just crossed the border illegally, didn't go through a legal port of entry. And they open up the door for these people, and they squeeze you dry to provide these people things like free healthcare and legal aid. biblically, this isn't compassion. This is injustice. So let's bring it home spiritually. I'm going to start doing this where we look to scripture. Okay. What does scripture say about this? Because the Bible is the basic instructions before leaving earth. We're a nation of laws, not feelings. Okay. God's word commands compassion, but never at the expense of truth, order, and justice. So here's what Leviticus 19:15 says. You shall do no injustice in judgment. Isaiah 5:20 says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Welcoming a stranger is one thing, but enabling law-breaking, lying to your citizens, manipulating census data, that's corruption. Okay. And the governor is going to try to gaslight you. He's going to try to gaslight you, and he's going to try to convince you that what he's not doing is bringing these illegal immigrants in to pad the numbers. Okay, he's padding the numbers with illegals to hold on to political power because he wants to run for president or he wants to run for governor again. And this is the one point or the one thing that is going to be used against him for sure in whatever race he runs next. Hey, governor, talk about the mass exodus. People don't want to live here. They haven't wanted to live here since 2014. There's been out-migration every single year since 2014. So here's where it hits your wallet, okay? Pritzker's fantasy of growth lets him justify higher state budgets. Okay, we're losing people. Why are we spending more money than we ever have in the state of Illinois? Like I said, before Governor J.B. Pritzker came in, we were spending like $300 billion. That's what our budget was. And then now it's ballooned to $55 billion. So we've lost a ton, 250 residents, I think, within the last year or something like that. We've lost a ton of people, but yet we're spending way more money. So his fantasy of the state's growing, the state is growing people. This justifies higher state budgets, more dependency programs. Like I said, the free healthcare for illegal immigrants. These are dependency programs because you've got to get them to stay here and vote for you. You've got to secure your base. So you got to implement these dependency programs. Expanded sanctuary policies, the Trust Act. That's this fantasy of growth. He's got to ensure that the people who are coming in, the illegal immigrants, the 500,000, that they don't get shipped off, right? Because he's got to make sure he's got his political power and the numbers, the people, so he can count them in the census, and he can get even more federal government dollars because the population is higher, and he's inflating the population using these illegals. And this is what I think he's doing, because why would you create expanded sanctuary policies that protect these illegal immigrants from ICE and deportation and things like that, and prohibit your local law enforcement here in the state of Illinois from working with ICE? Although I don't think that the Trust Act actually says that. I interpret it a little bit differently. But the free healthcare for undocumented illegal immigrants costing over $1 billion a year, 1.6 billion, I think it is. I mean, this is hurting you. This is hurting your wallet. The dependency programs, the sanctuary policies. This is hurting you, and you're paying for it all. Not the millionaires. He claims to tax all the time, right? Tax the millionaires. Shut up. The illegal immigrants are draining the system. They're not paying for it. I mean, come on. They're not taxed. They can't even get a legal job, right? Because they're here illegally, and federal law prohibits, obviously, you from employing an illegal immigrant. So they're not contributing to the system. You pay for it. The taxpayer, the parent, the small business owner, every fake person added to the census, that's real dollars out of your pocket. Real dollars out of your pocket. Real roads unpaved. Real ERs, emergency rooms, crowded. 500,000 people you just imported here. Real working class Illinoisans are suffering. So what can you do? I like to end it with this all the time. What can you do? Speak the truth, even if your governor won't. Share the real numbers. Share the census data. Okay, there's census data out there. Share the fact that we lost a congressional seat. That doesn't just happen just because, okay? Challenge the narrative. Push for census reform. Push for, hey, we shouldn't be counting illegal immigrants in the census. We need to pass a law. Okay, push for your lawmakers to even if you have a Democrat lawmaker, call their office, call Sharon Chung's office right now and demand that we have census reform and that we don't count illegal immigrants in the U.S. Census data. Call your, because I think that would be your congressman. So even if you have a Democrat congressman like Eric Sorensen, call him and say, hey, you need to push for that kind of policy. Period. Support lawmakers like Brad Holbrook, Darren LaHood, who are holding the line and who are calling this out, and pray for repentance, because at the end of the day, Illinois doesn't need just better numbers. We need a spiritual revival here, and we need honest leadership. So we don't just need more people. We need spiritual revival. And one more final word. Let's land this plane, Joey. Governor J.B. Pritzker can lie to the camera all he wants. He can lie to these U.S. congressmen just straight to their faces. He can lie all he wants, and he can say, your numbers are wrong, sir. And he can act like he's the final authority on reality. But the moving vans say otherwise. The church is closing. The small town business, the bakery that you used to go to closing. It all, you live here. You know, small towns are actually losing their schools. You have to close up the schools now. What the Chicago Teachers Union is trying to do, they're losing students like crazy, even despite the illegal immigrants coming in and being this and boosting the student enrollment. Even despite that, the schools have got to close because they've lost so much student population. They're trying to prohibit. They're actually trying to pass a moratorium, or they have tried to pass a moratorium on schools, on closing schools. They want to ban closing down schools. You have to, if you don't have the student population, right? And you have to consolidate. If you only have 10 kids going to a school, you got to close that school down, and it doesn't make sense to keep it open, right? So we're seeing this, not even just in small towns, but in Chicago. They've lost an insane amount of population, and their schools are closing down. The Chicago Teachers Union is trying to keep them open. Why? Because if they close down schools, then they have to cut salaries of these public teachers, and they have to lay off these administrators who run those schools. So what does the word of God say? Let God be true and every man a liar. Romans 3:4. There is one truth, and Governor J.B. Pritzker is just straight up lying. Okay, and we don't need more sanctuary for lawbreakers, people who enter this country through an illegal port of entry and don't want to seek asylum, don't want to get a work visa or student visa. We need sanctuary for truth here in the state of Illinois. Today, I do want to crack open Michael Madigan. You might know that name. This is one of the deepest political crime sagas in Illinois' history. We're going to crack open into that here in just a little bit, but I do want to take a quick break. I hope you enjoyed this conservative cat clip here next. And while you're here, subscribe to the channel and go to patriotpumpenergy.com. Get your bottle of Patriot Pump today. It's a great supplement, keeps you focused. There's black pepper extract in there. It's a fantastic, I drink it every single morning, keeps me focused. So grab your bottle of Patriot Pump today, patriotpumpenergy.com. Use promo code conservativecat. Welcome back to Conservative Cat Clips, where we don't purr for political correctness. No. I'm Kat, and today we are talking about the elephant, or should I say donkey, in the room. It's the Democrat Party and its long, complicated history, and really, let's be honest, self-serving relationship with Black America. Democrats love to talk like they are the champions of civil rights. They're not. Scroll past the hashtags and look at the history books that they don't teach in public school that they want to get rid of. Here's what you'll find. The Democrat Party, they've been playing the long game here of control, not empowerment. Let's rewind. The Democrat Party was the party of slavery, Jim Crow, and segregation. That's not rhetoric. It's history. Southern Democrats filibustered the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Robert Byrd, a Democrat, former KKK member and recruiter, ring any bells, by the way? He was a Democrat. He was a Dem. And you fast forward to today, how do they control the narrative now? Welfare, dependency, and government programs. Since LBJ launched the war on poverty in the 1960s, trillions, yes, trillions, 25 trillion, have been poured into welfare programs, and yet Black poverty still stubbornly high. In 2023, 19.5% of Black Americans live below the poverty line. Compare that to 8.6% of white Americans live below the poverty line. And here's the kicker. In 1960, over 75% of Black children were born to married parents, two parents. Today, flip that number. Over 70% are now born of black children are now born to single mothers, not to married parents. What changed? It wasn't culture. It wasn't community. It was policy. The welfare programs disincentivized marriage. It punished work and rewarded absenteeism. Okay, all in the name of help. And the Democrats, they built that system. They built that system, the welfare system, and they keep defending it decade after decade. They're defending it today. Because guess what? If you're dependent, you're predictable. You vote, and you can you vote the same way, and you can keep the check coming in, and you vote and vote and vote for Democrats, and the check keeps coming in. It's not compassion, it's control, and it's political plantation politics. And it's still happening in 2025. Meanwhile, conservatives offer school choice, they offer job growth, they offer criminal justice reform, entrepreneurship. And every time we push those ideas, we get called what? Racist, Uncle Tom's, sellout if you push things like school choice or entrepreneurship or homeschooling. God forbid you push homeschooling. The truth hurts when it threatens the hustle. Okay, so they're being hustled, Black Americans today. Here's the truth. Strong Black families don't need rescuing. They need opportunity, not handouts. They need fathers in the home, not more checks in the mailbox, okay? They need dignity in work, not defeat and bureaucracy. And they need leaders who lift them up, not lock them into these cycles of poverty for votes. That's what they're doing with these welfare programs. They're locking entire communities into this cycle of poverty just so that way they can secure votes, the Democrat Party. This has been Conservative Cat Clips reminding you the party of welfare isn't the party of freedom. And if you're relying on them to save you, you're not free, you're owned. All right. Hey, it's Conservative Cat. Be sure to subscribe. I'm going to get to some of your chats before we get into Michael Madigan. We are cracking open one of the deepest political crime sagas here in Illinois' history. Michael Madigan, he was just sentenced. We're going to get to that here in just a second, but I want to grab some chats. Great discernment and analysis. Thank you for highlighting Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. You know, and it's kind of interesting. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, she was questioning in the House Oversight Committee, hey, Governor Tim Walz, you know, there's an internal memo the DOJ's got, and the Chinese government has deemed you easy to compromise, essentially. They think that you'd be an easy individual to compromise. You're also attending this No Kings rally, which has ties to China. There's a billionaire who's funding it, who has ties to China through I think it was the nonprofit Indivisible. We're going to get to this here in just a second, how these No Kings protests were funded, follow the money. But she had asked him, you know, why'd you visit China 30 times? I haven't even visited my local diner 30 times, and I'm considered a regular, right? This is insane. At that point, they've got like a booth with your name on it. There, Tim Walz, you visited China 30 times. So she asked him about all of this in this Congressional House Oversight Committee hearing. And what's interesting was that the moment she started asking these questions and they started really pressing these governors about their ties to foreign adversaries, Governor J.B. Pritzker is not blameless in this, by the way. Goshen, the electric vehicle battery maker, we know has ties to companies that practice slave labor of the Uyghurs. Okay, so the Uyghur population, Goshen, he wants and gave them over 500 million in tax credits to this CCP tie or Chinese tied Goshen company. Okay, we know Governor J.B. Pritzker did that. We know Governor J.B. Pritzker just signed a bill that transitions us off of the FDA standard, the Federal Drug Administration standard for public health, and he transitioned us to the World Health Organization standard. That's China, right? They aren't actually scientists or doctors who operate World Health Organization. These are like CCP operative, like government officials, the WHO. We know that Governor J.B. Pritzker has gone and done trade deals with Mexico, United Kingdom. He sanctioned El Salvador. He's really not acting as if he is running a state within the United States of America. He's acting as if he's running Pritzkerstan, a separate country. Okay, so I wanted to hear more questions of Governor J.B. Pritzker and his ties to China as well, because really, let's be honest, who benefits from this chaos of illegal immigration? I would say the Chinese. Now, we have to remember geopolitically what's going on here with China. They've moved in on Africa, they've moved in on South America, and they've created ports, and they're being very, very aggressive here with these debt trap loans. I've talked about this before, where they come in into these poor countries, they give them all kinds of loans to create new infrastructure. When they can't pay it off, China comes in and pretty much sets up camp. So South America and Africa is right below Europe. Okay, think about where this is geographically. Whereas right below Europe, strategically, China wants to be close to Europe, but they also want to be close to North America. Now, they can't come in guns blazing, right? But this is a silent takeover, and I think that China really benefits from the chaos that is illegal immigration. And that's probably why they're throwing all kinds of money towards these nonprofits that put on these protests, the 5051 movement or whatever the hell that is. That's, of course, backed by MoveOn.org, or has ties to the MoveOn.org, which is a longtime Democrat progressive nonprofit organization that's backed by Reid Hoffman and George Soros. But CCP, they have ties to Indivisible, which is another nonprofit that had set up these. And we're going to get to this here in just a second. But yes, you're so right. Anna Paulina Luna, it was interesting when she started questioning Tim Walz here. Then guess what happened? Remember Senator Padilla? I think that was a total performance. He went in and he went after Kristi Noem, because guess what happened? They stopped questioning the governors at this House Oversight Committee about their foreign ties. We should have questioned Governor J.B. Pritzker more about that, but Anna Paulina got in one question at least of Governor Tim Walz. And right after, like that question, Anna Paulina Luna, they went to break, like recess, and then this happened with Senator Padilla. And guess what? When the governors came back, they had talking points at the ready to talk about Senator Padilla and how, President Donald Trump is arresting sitting senators, and they're handcuffing sitting senators or whatever. So they had talking points at the ready, and they weren't talking about their foreign ties anymore. They were talking about Senator Padilla. So, yeah, I think that we need to talk more about these governors' ties to foreign governments. It's odd. I will say this with the whole Vance Bolter thing. It's odd that he has ties to Africa. We know what the geopolitical landscape is over there with China right now. He has ties to this, obviously, Minnesota Africans United organization. They scrubbed him from the website shortly after he committed these murders and almost killed Hoffman, the other senator, not Melissa, but John Hoffman, the other Democrat, and his wife, Yvette. We need to ask the question, at least, was this an act of our foreign adversaries going after our politicians? I think that we need to ask that question. A couple of more chats, and then we're going to get into Michael Madigan. To throw Timmy off, you just ask him, what is a woman? And Governor J.B. Pritzker. Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked this. They brought up an old tweet about how Governor J.B. Pritzker said, in protest, we should all use different bathrooms today. Governor J.B. Pritzker, have you used a woman's bathroom? Have you ever thought that women don't want you in their bathrooms? Yeah, they all can't answer this very basic question, what is a woman? Henry, I'm glad you brought this up. Compare body size. So I know exactly what you're talking about, because I thought the same exact thing with Vance Bolter. So he went and he committed these crimes in a rubber mask. You cannot tell who was under that rubber mask, by the way. So I'm going to be interested to tune into this trial when it actually happens. Number one, I think that there could possibly be a mistrial because the negligence really of the police who apprehended him. This was wild. I can't believe that the Ramsey County Sheriff put this out on social media. They took a picture of him, throws it on Facebook, and they say, this is the face of evil. And they said, after relentless and determined police work, the killer is now in custody. I've done this a very long time, folks. I've covered shootings, crime. I've never seen this where a county sheriff comes out and says, hey, the killer. Okay, you have to use in a professional setting, right? And they should know this because there's a little something called due process here. You can't claim that he's the killer on Facebook. You can't do that as law enforcement. You have to say alleged killer. The suspect has been apprehended, right? You can call him the suspect. He's been arrested. We've apprehended the suspect. You can't blatantly call him a killer. Now, the face of evil thing, okay, that's a bit much, but they blatantly called him the killer. And I think that that's enough for a mistrial. I don't know. I'd hate to see that happen. But shame on the police for doing that because now he's got ammunition to declare a mistrial, I believe. That's wild. I've never seen a county sheriff department put something out online like that, which is weird. So, yeah, the body cam, to get back to you, Henry, sorry. The body cam, the rubber mask, him in the police uniform, the size of that individual looks smaller than that of the pictures of him in the cowboy hat where he was pictured later, where he outran police and he was in this cowboy hat. I don't know. He's a very big guy. I'd be shocked if he could outrun police. There's a lot of things about this story that do not add up. The fact that Governor Tim Walz concealed the fact that the wife, Jennifer Bolter, interned for him in 2010 as a congressman. Not to mention, he appointed Vance Bolter as a governor's on the governor's workforce development board. He concealed those facts and he said that it was politically motivated. You know, I don't know about you, but I think Tim Walz needs to be questioned. It's weird that he had the No Kings flyers in his car as well. There's a lot of weird things about this story. I don't know much. I do think that the question needs to be asked. Was this guy, whoever killed these politicians, these lawmakers, Democrat lawmakers, Melissa and John, John didn't die. He was shot and severely wounded. He and his wife, Melissa, and her husband, Mark, died. We need to ask the question, was he working on behalf of a foreign government? Whoever killed these people. Because when public servants start dying, on the same day, you've got these Chinese-backed organizations organizing these mass riots, mass protests. When you've got that happening, we need to start to question, hey, was this done at the behest of a foreign adversary or a foreign adversary? Let's get to Michael Madigan, shall we? We know that this is the longest. This is been a story for a long time in Illinois. Deep political crime saga. Michael Madigan, you know his name. If you're under 40, you might not be deeply immersed in this story. And especially if you haven't been following state politics very much, and if you're under 40, you might not understand how much this man controlled your life, your taxes, your electric bill, and your job prospects, your public school quality, and even the justice system itself. Okay, so we're going to talk about this. Who is Michael Madigan? Democrat, Chicago. He served in the Illinois House from 1971 to 2021. That's 50 years. That's a century. Most marriages don't last that long. And the title representative isn't as important as this title, House Speaker. So he's House Speaker between 1983 and 2021. So what does House Speaker mean? This is really, really important because the House Speaker still, by the way, it didn't end with Michael Madigan, still has control over what bills come to the floor. So if the Speaker doesn't want to hear the bill, it won't get called. What districts got money? What businesses were in, and who got hired, who got fired, who got prosecuted, and he was the chair of the Illinois Democrat Party as well. Okay, So from 1998 to 2021, he was the chair of the Illinois Democratic Party, which means he controlled campaign funds, endorsements, and the party machinery. One man, one machine, unaccountable, untouchable until now. So in March of 2022, federal prosecutors dropped down the hammer, 23 counts against Madigan, including bribery, racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy. And they called it the Madigan Enterprise. That's right, like a mob. The Madigan Enterprise. The scheme centered around two things, ComEd and AT&T, bribery deals, and then Madigan's private property tax law firm. So let's break this down. ComEd and AT&T, the utilities paid out no work or little work jobs and contracts to people loyal to Madigan. Okay. In exchange, they got favorable legislation. In Springfield, legislation you paid for, higher rates, guaranteed profits, industry protection. That's what this is all about. And this wasn't campaign finance. This was old school bribery, jobs, contracts, money. The goal, keep Madigan happy so our corporation gets whatever we want from the state. That's ComEd. Okay, so ComEd hired the unions that backed Michael Madigan and were friends of Michael Madigan. Because Michael Madigan, got the union coffers, the money poured into his political machine. And in exchange for hiring his guys, they would get favorable legislation in Springfield ComEd. Okay, so 4 executives and lobbyists from ComEd were convicted in 2023. ComEd had to pay a $200 million fine, but Madigan kept denying. He kept deflecting. He kept lying until 2024. So that is when the trial happened, and here ultimately a sentence. So in February of 2024, Michael Madigan was convicted on 10 counts: bribery, conspiracy, wire fraud, and the use of a facility to promote unlawful activity. So he was sentenced this past Friday to 90 months in prison. That's 7.5 years. And then he also had a $2.5 million fine. Judge Jack Blakey didn't mince words, according to the Center Square. You lied, sir. That's what the judge said to Michael Madigan. And that's after Michael Madigan stood up and said, I'm really sorry. I'm truly sorry for putting the people of the state of Illinois through this. But actions speak louder than apologies, because this wasn't a one-time slip-up. This was a lifestyle of corruption that Madigan had built. And Madigan tried to ask for home confinement. By the way, he did not get home confinement. I thought he was going to get home confinement. I was wrong. He asked for probation, and then he asked for community service. Why did he do that? Because he's 83 years old. I'm sorry, but just because you're 83 years old doesn't make you immune to a sentence, okay? Or keep you from serving a sentence. You do the crime, you serve the time. So make no mistake, he did get mercy, though. 12.5 years is what the prosecutors originally wanted. He got 7.5 years. So think about this. Most likely with good behavior, he's going to get off or get out earlier. So while he's off in prison, he actually still collects a pension, by the way, which is hilarious. And who is paying his pension? You, the taxpayer. So think about that. Okay. So he commits all this crime. He's convicted of all these crimes, yet he still gets a taxpayer-funded pension. Madigan didn't just enrich himself. He shaped the political culture here in the state of Illinois, and it still suffocates Illinois today. I told you about the Chicago transit system. They want $770 million because not to fix the infrastructure of the transit system, not to make it more safe, not to make this scheduling more consistent of the buses and of the trains. No. They want to kind of do like this app. They want to do an app that consolidates the 7 apps that they have. And they just want to keep things status quo because the $770 million is going to stop them from falling off the fiscal cliff in 2026. So really what this is, it's unions. They're trying to secure more money for the unions that then in turn bankroll their campaigns. Okay, so that's really what this is. Chicago politicians are trying to secure more taxpayer dollars for these union bosses, and these union bosses are going to have these bloated salaries, and then they turn around and donate that money right back to the politicians. So this still goes on. It's a political culture that is going to take years, I think, to break up. They protected public sector unions at the expense of taxpayers. They still do that today. Look at the Chicago Teachers Union. They reward insiders. They punish challengers. They hold Illinois hostage with property tax games. That's what they did under Michael Madigan. He rigged the property tax system so commercial clients could get huge cuts on their assessments, by the way, if they hired his law firm. So that was a whole nother part of this. If these commercial clients used his law firm, then they would get these huge cuts on property tax assessments, which is absolutely insane. So you were paying all kinds of property taxes, and they weren't, these people who were using his law firm. So your property taxes just kept going up and up and up and up. That's not democracy. It's extortion. That's extortion. And where was the media in all of this? I just want to ask this question. Where was the media? Mostly asleep. Where were Republicans? They were often compromised, a part of the Michael Madigan machine, or they were complacent. Where were the churches? They were silent. But God isn't silent. So let me bring it home spiritually for you. Proverbs 29:4 says this: by justice a king gives a country stability, but those who are greedy for bribes tear it down. Proverbs 29:4. Madigan tore down Illinois with the whole bribery thing, with favorable contracts to the guys who backed Michael Madigan, ComEd giving favorable contracts to the guys who backed Michael Madigan. In exchange, ComEd would get favorable legislation in Springfield. He tore down Illinois, Michael Madigan, and he was a king. And he didn't provide stability here in the state of Illinois. No. So what should the righteous do? The righteous, we need to expose the works of darkness. We need to speak the truth. We need to call out corruption. Micah 6:8 says, he has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So there is no justice in political bribery. There is no humility in 50 years of manipulation. But there is accountability here, even if it comes late, even if it isn't exactly what I wanted. I wanted to see him in prison for years. It should have, 20 years, 50 years, right? But he did go to prison. He is going to prison. And the machine he built, though, it still lives on. It's still standing. His cronies still sit in office. The unions are still fed and are still given these favorable contracts. These public unions continue to bankroll these politicians, and they continue to secure more taxpayer dollars to provide these unions. The tax schemes he created are still hurting Illinois families today. So what can you do? You can demand local reform, start at your county boards, start at your school boards, pray for godly leaders. We need Daniels and lions' dens, not snakes in suits. Really, that's what Michael Madigan's cronies are all like. All of them, all the Democrats, and even Republicans. They're like snakes in suits. We need to support watchdog groups. You can support this show by subscribing to the channel. Run for something, even become a candidate. If you are a godly person and if you are all about exposing darkness, run for office. You can run, and Illinois doesn't have to have these corrupt politicians. We can have faithful servants. So Michael Madigan thought he was untouchable. For 5 decades, he ran Illinois like a mafia boss. But the truth doesn't stay buried. It always comes out. God will not be mocked. And one of America's most corrupt politicians is heading to prison. So that's a win. I think that it is a win for the people. He should have gotten more. I agree. But this should serve as a warning to the powerful. Like, hey, you do this, you could end up where Michael Madigan is at and be 83 years old and having to serve a 7-year prison sentence. Okay. Let's get to a few other things this morning. I got to take a quick break, but I do want to talk about this fake news spin on this ICE arrest. This was hilarious. So there was this pregnant woman, and she was there when they were conducting an ICE raid, but this fake news outlet, they lied and they printed these headlines, and they didn't include the fact that the ICE raid was for the husband, okay, not the pregnant woman. And the husband has a criminal record. He almost killed somebody, right? He originally was charged with attempted murder. They got it pled down to assault, and he was a drug trafficking type guy. And ICE wanted him, okay? But the way the fake news media reported it was that Kristi Noem and ICE, they came and they raided this pregnant woman's house. And like, they didn't even include the fact that they were going after her husband and not her. They were going after her husband who had the criminal record. So we're going to get to that. Plus TikToker influencers, they're all really creepily like parroting the same exact talking points, anti-Trump, anti-ICE talking points. And really at the end of the day, it's very well organized. This No Kings protest, I did some digging, found out who is funding this thing. And Indivisible, like I said, has ties to the Chinese government. They have ties there. And I'm going to show you step by step how you can find out if a nonprofit is backed by, these progressive billionaires or even possibly foreign adversaries. And I'm going to show you and prove to you that this was not an organic grassroots movement. Okay, this was carefully planned. I didn't even hear about the No Kings protest until about a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago. In order to pull something like this off, like there were tons of people, thousands of people across the nation who were gathering in all of the major cities, even not in major cities like Bloomington Normal. They had a No Kings protest. There was probably a few thousand people there, a couple thousand. They were all geriatric, okay, people who watch CNN, like 65 plus. They're, the vibrant liberal protesters that you think of, back in the 60s, the hippies, they were vibrant. No, these people are like 65 plus, and they're like just old, really old. I love the elderly. It's not that. I'm not against the elderly, but these people sit in front of their TVs all day. They're retired and they sit in front of CNN, and that's why they're there. Okay. Now, some of these people were probably paid to be there. I'm not going to say all of them, but this was very well organized. And to pull something like this off in a matter of a week and a half, impressive. I will say that, very impressive, but it's only impressive until you find out how much money is involved here. The infrastructure. If you've ever planned an event, it takes a lot of infrastructure, timing, advertisement, blasting on social media, and infrastructure for signups and registration. All of that infrastructure was provided by mainly Indivisible. There were multiple other nonprofit organizations, but I'm tracking everything back to this Indivisible, which has ties to, of course, the Tides Foundation. We know that the Tides Foundation, in fun fact, Pritzker family has ties to the Tides Foundation, and George Soros has ties to the Tides Foundation. So we're going to get to all of that here in just a second. Please enjoy this conservative cat clip here. I'll be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat Clips, where the claws come out for the truth. No spin, no fluff, just the facts the media would you rather forget. They don't want you to have the facts. So I'm Kat, and we're talking about what really happened in the death of George Floyd in the spring of 2020, around May of 2020. And what it did to this country, what the death of George Floyd did. So let's start here. George Floyd, his death, sad. I mean, it's sad when anybody dies. It sparked outrage across the world. The video was pretty graphic. The officer's actions were condemned by conservatives. Not me, though, because I understand that this was a hold that was used by law enforcement back then and is continued to be used to this day. This is a hold. What came next? It wasn't just mourning. Okay, it was a movement fueled by a carefully crafted narrative. Suddenly, the message was Floyd is a martyr. He wasn't a man who just died. He was a symbol. Okay, he became a symbol, and in many corners, untouchable. You couldn't talk about who George Floyd was. You couldn't talk about his past. You couldn't talk about how he had, 6 nanograms of fentanyl in his system, which was like 16 nanograms of fentanyl in his system, which is 3 times the normal amount of an overdose. Okay, so he could have overdosed 3 times over. Okay, so here's what the media buried. The autopsy report shows that Floyd had fentanyl and meth in his system. And the county medical examiner even said that that was fatal in and of itself on its own. Okay, he had 3 times the amount of fentanyl in his system. That's 16 nanograms, which you might think is very, very small, but that's the tip of your pencil, by the way. That is enough to kill somebody 3 times over. Okay, so fentanyl is crazy stuff. He had a long criminal history. He had a conviction for aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon. He was buried in a golden casket. So, like I said, he wasn't just a man who died. He was a martyr, and not just a martyr. He was a symbol. He was buried in a gold casket. This is a guy who pointed a gun at a pregnant woman's belly, by the way. And it was nationally televised, his burial. And it was attended by politicians and celebrities. Officers offered him air conditioning, by the way, prior to him being down on the ground with Derek Chauvin and putting him in that hold, which everybody thought was just so crazy. But that's just a classic law enforcement hold. Okay, and there's no way he could have died by being in that hold. And prior to that, the officers offered the guy air conditioning on the body cam. Okay, so now ask yourself, was this about justice or was this about political theater? Because what followed wasn't reform. Cities rushed to fund their police again, much like what happened with Michael Brown in 2014. Violent crime skyrocketed, especially in Black and minority communities. Officers left the force in droves. Now we're left with total moral collapse, and nobody's really all that great in law enforcement anymore. And law enforcement, I would say, has hit a rock bottom because we're scraping the barrel for good officers nowadays. And it was all based on this narrative that skipped over the facts and weaponized emotion. And the left painted this as if the police were racist and Derek Chauvin did this because he was white, because the other guy was Black. No, they told us it was systemic oppression, and that systemic oppression is everywhere. And they cashed in, by the way. They cashed in on all the lies. BLM during this time raised over $90 million in 2020 alone. Yet many local chapters, BLM chapters and families, they never saw a penny of it. Guess who did get all of that money? The people at the tippity top of the organization. They got mansions, salaries. And meanwhile, your small businesses burned, your targets were looted, your community suffered, Black-owned businesses were vandalized, and the media, they were silent when the facts came out, and they did not fit the script that they had already created. So those facts have not been presented widely. You'll hear them here on Conservative Cat Clips. But let me be clear what happened to George Floyd. It's sad, but it was predictable. Okay, the guy was messed up and most likely would have died had not the cops even showed up that day. He had 3 times the amount of fentanyl in his system, 3 times the overdose amount. So we've got to separate tragedy from truth, and we have to stop passing laws based on emotion. Instead, we should be passing laws based on evidence. And the people who suffered the most, everyday Americans. This has been Conservative Cat Clips reminding you, we have to demand better policing, yes, but we have to do it without destroying law and order and without letting these fat cats at the tippity top of the BLM organization getting rich. And maybe it's time we start honoring the truth with the same passion we give to the narratives that the media comes up with. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. Hey, welcome back to Conservative Cat. Be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, share this out, and tell one person about Conservative Cat today. Before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about the fake news media. They dedicated its reporting, of course, to make sure that no human is illegal. They've dedicated this reporting, I'm going to get to this story, to making sure that nobody sees people as illegal, okay? But people can do illegal things, okay? And they are so desperate to pursue this whole ideology that no human is illegal that they are de facto protecting somebody who's committed drug trafficking and attempted murder, but it got pled down, by the way, just to assault this guy. They ignore, I don't know why they do this. Why do they have to do this for people who commit very heinous crimes? They try to gaslight you on your stance when it comes to federal immigration. And their intent here was to mislead you with this story. And I don't know why they've got to go to bat for these types of people. Like, okay, sure. Even if you believe that no human is illegal and you're all about undocumented immigrants staying here, why do we have to go to bat and justify the illegal activity of people who are just scumbags, the scum of the earth? Bill Melugin, he threw this out on X, Twitter. Here we go. I was at this operation with Kristi Noem. Okay, now what this article did, it was KTLA, what this news media outlet did. I'm sure it's like an ABC affiliate or something like that, because there's 5 conglomerates, by the way, that operate all of the media here in the state or in the nation. There's only 5 companies, and they're all like propagandists, and I bet this is like an ABC affiliate. So KTLA, they threw this out there and they said that Kristi Noem participated in targeting an operation with ICE and targeting this woman who's pregnant. Actually, what was going on, they weren't targeting the pregnant mother. They were targeting the husband, the illegal alien husband who had been convicted of drug trafficking in February and an attempted murder charge, which got pleaded down to an assault conviction. So he's convicted of assault, convicted of drug trafficking. ICE had a criminal judicial warrant for his arrest. Okay. So signed off by a federal judge, and he illegally re-entered the United States after removal, which is a felony, by the way. And here's how KTL kind of reported it. They said, Kristi Noem, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem attends ICE raid at home of pregnant LA County mother. This is how the fake news story went down, okay? This was clearly intended to get you to think this headline. This was their headline. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem attends ICE raid at home of pregnant LA County mother. Intended to get you to think that they were going after an innocent pregnant lady. Okay, but that's not what happened. In the reporting, they deliberately left out the part that Homeland Security was trying to get the husband, who had all of these convictions and was a drug trafficker and attempted to murder somebody and was charged with that, but ultimately was convicted of assault because he got it pled down. The husband was the one being targeted. He was the guy with the criminal record, and then he was deported, but then he legally re-entered the United States, which is another felony, by the way. They had a lawful order signed off by a federal judge. DHS, they tweeted this out. They said, fake news. At this house, there was an illegal alien from Mexico who had been previously deported, and his criminal history includes drug trafficking and assault. ICE had a warrant for his arrest. Now, while we could give props for the outlet, KTLA, the fake news outlet, they did edit the story. They were forced to edit the story and update their story and include the fact that they were after the husband. And I guess we could give them props, but the damage has already been done, and that's what fake news media does. They throw out these headlines and they hope that the people run with it, and people did run with it. And, you know, this is obviously the intent of the outlet, and I think that was the intent of the outlet all along. Just throw it out there, then like page 30, you can print like an update, right? So according to KTLA, the raid occurred Thursday morning when about a half a dozen vehicles carrying heavily armed, masked U.S. immigration and custom and enforcement agents. I love it. Just the exaggeration here. Converged on a home occupied by a 28-year-old pregnant woman of 4. Oh boy. After hearing about the raid, LA County Supervisor Janice Hahn went to Huntington Park neighborhood and spoke with some of Sabrina Medina's neighbors. So Sabrina is the woman who is pregnant, and the county supervisor went and spoke with neighbors of Sabrina's. 4 months pregnant with her 5th child. The Huntington Park mother said that if her husband is deported, the family's future is bleak. This is how they're reporting it, okay? Man, it's so sad, so sad. Later in the article, they finally updated the article, and they included the fact that this illegal alien from Mexico had already been previously deported, that his criminal record was drug trafficking and assault. So in other words, their intent was really just to tug on your emotions, make you feel like this pregnant woman, she's pregnant with her 5th child, what is she going to do without her lovely husband? And they're just coming in the dead of night with their heavy arms and their militia, and they're taking me away. No, this guy was bad. He was a bad guy, and he's a scummy person. And why do these people go to bat for the scummiest people on earth. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And what makes it even worse is that the county supervisor did the exact same thing as the media did. They went to bat for the scummiest person on earth, probably, and they didn't do any due diligence to check and see, hey, is DHS justified here in their deportation? This is why the media is largely irrelevant, and it's totally naive outlets assume that illegal immigrants are victims always, just because they illegally cross the border or come through an illegal port of entry. That automatically makes them a victim, and that's a myth. 9 times out of 10, most of those people commit, because think about this, it's a mentality thing. If you have the mentality to illegally enter the United States through an illegal port of entry, what's stopping you from committing more crimes? Really? I mean, if you've got the mentality of crossing the border illegally, yeah, maybe I will sell some dope. Maybe I will beat somebody up to a point where I was originally charged with attempted murder, but got it pled down to assault. So it's a myth, okay, that illegal immigrants are always victims. Just simply because they cross the border through an illegal port of entry, the media says that, oh, because you came from a crappy country, that means you're a great person. That means you're a victim. No. 9 times out of 10, I would say 8 times out of 10, a lot of these illegal immigrants commit crimes even after committing the crime of illegally entering the country. Why? Because it's a mentality thing. You are willing to commit a crime here, so you are going to commit a crime here. It's a mentality thing. So I want to get to this because this is kind of shocking. Not really. I say it's shocking. It's kind of predictable. So many on the left believe that breaking federal immigration laws is no different than jaywalking or littering. Okay. By that flawed logic, they treat the law as if it's effectively amounts. I mean, like that. If you're going to treat it like littering or like jaywalking, walking through an illegal port of entry, you're essentially calling for open borders. Okay, that's what you want. Okay, so let's cut the crap. That by that logic, you want open borders. Okay, you're not even willing to admit that this is a crazy offense, crazier than jaywalking, crazier than littering. You're illegally entering the country and you're taking a crap all over our sovereignty. That's much different than jaywalking. Okay, so in TikTok, this is fascinating. You'll see this here. It's an echo chamber, and they start like parroting very creepily the same talking point that illegally entering the country through an illegal port of entry is the same as jaywalking and littering, and they're trying to gaslight the public into oblivion. So there appears to be a coordinated messaging campaign here spreading throughout TikTok, where you've got these creators who have released nearly identical statements. They say the same thing about these ICE raids. Many large creators have been releasing extremely similar statements where they shame other creators for not speaking out against the raids. The creators tell other people that they're bad people unless they post videos of themselves condemning the riots or the raids. So this is just regurgitating the same phrases. They're comparing illegal immigration to jaywalking, and they're regurgitating that phrase. And I'm going to share with you this clip, and then I'll share with you all of the, because you got them all supercut next to each other, these TikTokers. And it seems coordinated, probably because it is. And these creators are paid to go out there and make these very, very similar statements. Take a listen. Here we go.
Being in a country that you're in illegally is a civil offense, not a criminal one. You know what else is a civil offense? Jaywalking.
And being undocumented is not a criminal offense. It's a civil one. And if you've ever jaywalked, congratulations, because you've also committed a civil offense.
Have you ever sped over the speed limit? Have you ever drank or smoked underage? Have you ever drank and then driven a car? What about jaywalking?
Being undocumented in America is a civil offense. It's not a criminal one. It's the same caliber of crime as traffic offense.
Just a reminder, in case anyone forgot, being undocumented is a civil offense, not a criminal one.
If you've so much as littered on public property, I never want to hear, oh, but they broke a law. as a justification for your hate.
If these influencers are choosing not to use their platforms, let's force them to. I'm tired of all these influencers not speaking up right now because things are happening right now in our own backyards, and some of these people are staying quiet.
I'm taking note of clocking in and following every single LA-based creator who is completely ignoring what's going on.
Where the fuck are all these loudmouth ass celebrities and influencers when they get on this internet and they dropping music, or they're dropping a collab, or they're dropping a motherfucking beauty kit, or they're dropping a motherfucking perfume? Baby, people are getting snatched up in the United States of America.
You reap the benefits of Los Angeles and you're not willing to protect your...
Okay, I think you guys get the point here. So a ton of influencers, okay? And these aren't even really good arguments. They make no sense, especially considering that no one has a right to be here, inherently has a right to be here. This is called sovereignty, okay? And this is federal immigration law. You're breaking federal law, which is a big difference compared to jaywalking. A lot of that is like civil ordinances and city ordinances that they implement, or, you know, traffic violations or whatever. They've got specific ordinances at a local level to address that kind of behavior. This is a federal law. This is taking a crap all over the country's sovereignty. Okay, so it's a slap in the face to all these victims, by the way, who have to suffer or have suffered under illegal immigration, especially those like Laken Riley's family who lost Laken at the hands of an illegal immigrant who had no right to be here, was here, despite it being against federal law. So let me play this. You'll hear this, and I've got this. It's where they're all right next to each other. Here's the talking points. It's not a crime. It's a civil violation. People cannot be illegal on stolen land. Being undocumented is a civil offense with an expired or like driving on an expired license. So take a listen to this. Here we go. This is them all parroting the same talking points. Okay, so I think you get the point. It's weird. It's creepy. They're all parroting the same talking points. Kind of reminds me, during the pandemic, you had mainstream media doing the same thing, where they word for word had like pretty much the exact same scripts. Take a listen.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about trouble and trying to be responsible, one-sided news stories in our country.
Sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish things simply aren't true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media.
Okay, so you guys remember the mainstream media? They all had like pretty much the same talking points. It's weird that it's happening on social media now, because they're doing like social media bits, and it's kind of reminiscent of. So I think that the left is catching on to the social media thing, and what they're going to try to do is send out these talking points via these NGOs or via these Democrat communication. So like there were like 50 Democrats, congressmen and women, who had posted the same exact thing, like on Twitter. It's really weird. So there's somebody pulling the strings, and they're getting the influencers, they're getting congressmen and women to say the exact same things on social media. So they're coordinating. Now, speaking about coordination, I want to get to what I found out about the No Kings protest, because this is pretty shocking stuff. The No Kings protest on June 14th, 2025 was primarily organized by a coalition of progressive groups like Indivisible and 5051 Movement. Okay, so I've tracked pretty much all of this back to Indivisible almost. All of these protests were backed by Indivisible. Christy Walton, the Walmart heiress, she funded a full-page advertisement in New York Times on June 8th to promote these protests. Indivisible, a nonprofit organization with over 150 organizations that it donates and funnels money to, 150 organizations, including labor unions and civil rights groups. They received funding from billionaire donors, Indivisible. Okay. Billionaire donors with ties to China, by the way. So 5051, that movement, if you guys remember Hands Off, that protest, they have ties to the Move On organization, which we know is supported by billionaire George Soros and Reid Hoffman. This Move On organization has been around since Bill Clinton. It was an organization that was actually birthed or created because of Bill Clinton, and it tried to sway public opinion about Bill Clinton being impeached. Okay. So I hope more information becomes available, and I think that it will if the IRS and the FBI investigates these nonprofits and their status of being an actual nonprofit, because they are not supposed to operate as political action committees. There are clear financial disclosure requirements. You're not supposed to be tax exempt. You're supposed to be a 501c4, not a 501c3. If you are acting as a political arm or a political action committee, nonprofit organizations are not supposed to be engaged in political activism. And if they do act as that, they act as a political action committee, there are different rules that apply. So many of these nonprofits, they are getting tax dollars. And I'm going to pull this up because I think that this is important for you to watch. There's this mobilize.us. So there's this leftist I was fighting with. She'll go nameless right now, or she'll remain nameless. This leftist I was fighting with. She shared something on her social media where it was shared out by the Boone County Democrats. Okay. So the Boone County Democrats, they shared this out. I'll share this with you. Hold on. Yeah, here we go. They shared this out. It was like an event on their calendar. And you can see here that you can go click see details, okay, of this No Kings event. And you guys got to be watching on YouTube here. Sorry, audio listeners. You have to look at this and you'll see here about this event. And then Boone County Democrats, they've got this on their event calendar. And you go to sign up, okay? And you will see that this is all facilitated by Indivisible. So it says right here, Indivisible is managing data and communications with participants. By registering, you agree to receive info from Indivisible about the event, receive communications via email and text message from Indivisible, and receive other updates and opportunities to take action or support No Kings partner organizations. You also agree to any data in this registration to be used. Okay, so this is very, very coordinated. This was with the Boone County Democrats. This is in Columbia, Missouri, I think. Yeah, it was in Missouri. And they shared this on their events, and then you click on the events, their calendar. Then it takes you to mobilize.us. And then from there, you can see that Indivisible is operating this registration system. So it's all facilitated by Indivisible, which has ties, of course, to China. I want to share this with you. This is Data Republican. This is where you go. You can kind of look up these organizations, EINs. But there's a nice little flow chart here, and it shows you exactly where this Indivisible gets its money from. Multiple organizations here, but let's scroll out and look down here. You can see the Tides Foundation. Okay, so you got to go all the way down here. And you've got the Public Health Institute. This is taxpayer-funded money, okay? Low-income investment fund. That's all taxpayer money. It's a high, so you can see the high taxpayer funds alert, okay? Then that money is then funneled into another nonprofit organization that's called the Tides and Center, okay? High taxpayer funding. Our taxpayer funds go to this organization, and they go to the Low Income Investment Fund organization. Then that money is then funneled into the Tides Foundation. We know who backs the Tides Foundation. George Soros, Governor J.B. Pritzker's family, by the way. And then you go up here. Where does the Tides Foundation give their money to? The Indivisible Project. So there's some interesting things going on here, because the Tide Advocacy So here's Tide Advocacy. I know that that's a 501c4. This is a 501c3. So it wouldn't be bad if Tide's Advocacy, the 501c4, was working on, this political infrastructure. It wouldn't be a bad thing. But then you've got these nonprofits, and they're funneling these taxpayer dollars through all of these various organizations. And then ultimately what winds up happening is your taxpayer dollars are going towards these protests, which result in, I think this last No Kings protest resulted in like over $200 million in damages. There were way over 16 arrests, I think, in Chicago alone. Not even over the weekend, but that was prior to the weekend. So there are multiple arrests. Your taxpayer dollars are going towards this, and they're funneling the money through all of these various organizations. So I wanted to show you that this morning. I gotta go. It's 8:05, but I appreciate you guys being here. Be sure to subscribe and smash the like button. Share this out with your friends. And remember, your taxpayer dollars are going towards these massive protests. They are very well funded, very well organized, and this isn't organic. This is not a grassroots movement. And at the end of the day, I actually really like what Donald Trump said on Truth Social recently, which was really funny. And I'll end with this because he doesn't let these people get him down at all. So let's take a look at this. On Truth Social, Donald Trump says, "A huge thank you to all the No Kings protesters yesterday. I was very concerned that a king was trying to take my place. Thanks to your tireless efforts, I'm still your president. Great job to all." Donald Trump, he won't let these people get him down. Really, at the end of the day, you can't have your taxpayer dollars going towards political activists and political activism, because that is not a democracy. That is called fascism. That is called oligarchy, and that's called propaganda. You guys have a blessed day. Bye-bye. Love you so much.